Well,
Okay.
hello everyone. Welcome to the Grow to Be Free podcast. Today we have Miss Tania Pownall, and she is a beautiful woman who is a manifestation coach. And for those of you who can't see us, you'll see that we're kind of matching today. We're both wearing mock neck tank tops, which are also ribbed. So I think we're on the same level because we're both Filipino. And I'm so excited to chat with her today because she is going to talk about what it was like living in the Philippines, being an Asian woman, and learning how to find her voice. And I really relate to this because, me being Asian and also having other situations in my life that kind of suppress my voice, I felt like I could never speak it out. And, Tania, tell me a little bit about how that affected you growing up.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm just a little introduction. I am a manifestation coach, and I am so passionate about helping other people untie their own knots and helping other people heal themselves so that they could gracefully and playfully manifest the life that they deserve. And again, I love this topic, and I love that you're shining light into the finding my voice as a woman. And that's been a huge part of my spiritual journey and really finding myself. And your question, what about my past has made me feel like I didn't have a voice? And you touched on it a little bit when you talked about growing up in Asia and as an Asian woman. And I grew up as a very shy girl, and I don't think this directly relates to my location, but personally, I was very shy and I didn't really have anyone to express myself with, or I didn't really have anyone who held space for me. And I didn't have anyone that I looked up to that was expressing themselves, that expressed their truth and not really caring about what other people think. And it wasn't until I started my spiritual journey that I started loving myself. And I think that was the key to finding my truth and finding my voice. It was when I started to become more compassionate towards myself and really love all parts of Tanya.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, you mentioned how you didn't really have a role model, like a female role model. And it sounded like that was the reason why you felt like you couldn't express yourself properly. Did you feel like there was an overwhelming amount of male influence in your life? And was that part of why you felt like you couldn't speak up, or how did that work for you?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. Well, the environment does play a huge role in it because Filipino women were not very expressive, and there's always a fear of judgment that comes. I'm not saying also everyone felt this way, but it was very evident in the environment that I grew up in that women would hold their tongue. And I also did that, and I only noticed it later on. It wasn't something I was actually aware of, but it was only when I started working on myself that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm actually like this because of this and because of this person, and also because of the programming that I received. And yeah, it wasn't really until I started forgiving myself and the people around me that I started to grow as a person.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And you mentioned something earlier about your schooling and how it kind of placed you in a situation where you had a different perspective of being an Asian woman, as opposed to what the culture in the Philippines was. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I actually mentioned it before our call. Kiani, for those listening, Kiani and I had a chat just to get to know each other a little bit more before we started this call. And I mentioned to her that I did grow up in an international school. I grew up traveling, and I was very, very lucky, and I'm so, so blessed to have seen other perspectives of the world. But also, I was living in, I was born and raised in the Philippines, which is a developing country, and I was very aware of um, how hard it is for other people in the country. And I think, and you know what, that actually made me put away and just like brush off and put my feelings under the rug, because my thinking was, and the programming that I'd hear from my parents is like, you're so lucky, you should be a lot more grateful. Like I couldn't really, there's no validation towards my negative emotions. Like whenever I did feel bad, whenever I did feel sad, it's always been like, oh, you shouldn't, because look at your privileges, look at your education, look at how you're going to school compared to the rest of the people in the country. And that really and I'm so, so blessed. Like I am very grateful, but that did make me hide my voice.
Yeah.
It made me hide my voice and hide my truth, because I feel like I couldn't complain.
Mm. Wow. That is so true, because when you have
Yeah.
somebody who's telling you, no, you should be grateful. Like, look at all these things that you have. It's like, well, yeah, be grateful, but it shouldn't discount your feelings. You still have those feelings, and I feel like, especially in the Filipino culture, you probably know how dismissive Filipinos can be. Very
Mm,
dismissive, where it's like, hey, if we don't agree with you, we're going to shut you down right away. Like, don't bring that back up ever again. And that can very easily make you just want to be quiet and stay to yourself.
yes. Yeah, and I'm sure you resonate. And just like usually when you do speak about things like mental health and like the struggles you're going through, you're usually considered dramatic. And I'm personally very emotionally stable. So I actually had no problem really with the issues that I had. But like when I do have close friends and my sisters who were expressing their struggles and stuff, it was always shut down. So also just seeing that and reflecting that, I've quieted down myself as well. Just
Mm,
again, the culture, and it's not really something we talk about.
yeah, exactly. So was there a time where when you were growing up that you felt like you had to start speaking up more? Like, was there a turning point for you?
It never felt like I had to speak up more. It only awakened, it was meditation awakened like this inner wise confident woman in me that I never thought I had. And it was actually what really caused that. It was one, the meditations, and two, my self-talk, the dialogue that I started telling myself. I became aware of like, oh my gosh, like people told me that I was shy my whole life, so obviously I believed it. People told me that I was quiet, so obviously I believed it. And then when I became aware, when I started reading books and spirituality and opened the door of personal development, I'm like, oh, you mean I can write my a different story? You mean I can suddenly not be this person who, quote unquote, people said can't do anything or can't do anything for herself, who is shy and this and that. And then so when I started like really playing affirmations and telling myself amazing things that I can do, and also writing down the characteristics that this better version of Tania would have, like that's when things really unfolded, and it was very natural and effortless.
That's awesome. You said so many great things in that, and I can tell you just lit up when you started talking about all those things that you do. So tell us about that story. How did you start getting into personal development and meditation and all the things that you just said? How did you get into that?
Um, Thank you for that question. So I got into uni and I was partying a lot. I was living alone. What else was I gonna do? I was like literally
Yeah, that's what I do.
I was partying a lot, was not happy with myself, was not in love with myself, not in love with my life, just hiding it with the voices of other people and drinking and going out. Literally, Kiani, 6 times a week, I was out drinking. That's how bad it was. And doing drugs and stuff. And then I was just like, one day I realized that, oh, I actually don't want to feel this way anymore. And I think just putting out that intention attracted me to, it was actually a romantic partner that introduced me to, he wasn't forcing anything to me. It was just, he was at my place one time and like, well, we lived together and I would just see the growth that he was going through. And I opened this book that he had. It was called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And the title just, I was like, oh my gosh, what do you mean break the habit of being myself? And I didn't know what it meant, but all that it attracted me to it because I'm like, oh, okay, you mean I can actually not be sad anymore? I can actually do something about this. So I opened it and that led me to meditation and personal development. And from there, like I never stopped meditating. And that was over 2 years ago. So I haven't skipped a day of meditation for that long now. And it's awakened this inner healer and teacher in me. And I light up about everything that he teaches. Dr. Joe Dispenza has an amazing story as well. And he speaks about his personal story was the one that really intrigued me with his work. So what happened was, for anyone listening, and you can always search his personal story, but he is huge in this industry. But what happened was he got into a car accident. Sorry, not a car accident. He was cycling and a huge truck hit him from behind and he literally like broke his bones in his body. And something in him told him to meditate. I think he had the choice to either like do a surgery or not, and he chose not to do it. And he meditated for 6 weeks, 3 hours every day, and healed himself. So that really, I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you just meditated and healed your body and like restructured your bones? And that's when I knew magic happens. Like there is magic in there and there's power in meditation. And I'm like, right, I'm hopping on this trend. So it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to put that on my book list because that sounds
So
incredible. Yeah. So I know for a lot of people, including myself, who have maybe tried meditation before, the common I think the common objection people will have is that, oh, when I meditate, I don't feel like anything's happening, or like my mind just starts to wander. Like I don't see the benefits of this. Like what is the point? So what did you find as you were meditating, and how did you start doing it to where it could actually be productive for you?
um yeah, definitely. Like a lot of people ask me, and what comes up in their personal experience when they meditate, they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if how long I should be sitting there, what's supposed to happen. And I'm always saying, it's a process. That's why it's called meditation practice. It's something you need to practice every day. And yeah, when you quiet your mind, that's when you become connected to yourself and to something bigger than you. And it's hard to explain the feeling, but you'll know the feeling the more you really quiet your mind and really relax into it. You'll just feel so uplifted and literally feel, that's why they call it alignment, because you would literally feel your energy just line up into one, and it's such a beautiful, peaceful state. But again, it's like I compare meditation and like really getting into these like self-help habits, comparing it to like going to the gym. You can't just go to the gym one time and be be like this toned fit person. You have to keep going every day. So yeah, we have to remind ourselves that with meditation as well, you have to do it every day, and then you will eventually feel the powers of it.
So true. And that's a good analogy because your mind is a muscle. It is like the strongest muscle in your entire body. And we don't treat it like that at all. So a lot of us are very mentally weak because we don't practice consistency, or we don't practice that mindfulness that can help us start making those changes. Because like you said, you got to keep going every single day. It's not going to happen just one time at the gym. You have to show up, and eventually, after some reps and a little bit of pain, you're going to get better, you're going to get stronger, and you're going to have that strong mind that can heal yourself from a accident of, potentially. So for me, I my meditation time is my time with God, because I'm a Christian, and I sit every single morning, and I sit as if I was meditating, but I spend time talking to God. And I've learned from my from other like spiritual mentors in my life that, talking to God is actually more listening than it is talking.
Wow.
So I've learned to do an even amount of that, and that being actually quiet and listening has done amazing things for me. And in fact, this morning I had an experience. I wasn't even there for that long, like maybe like 5 or so minutes, and I started crying because I just got taken back to who I was before. How I was telling
Mm.
you, like 3 years ago, I was just so unhappy, and I couldn't really figure out why. I couldn't really get myself out of it. I felt those emotions again, but it was in a way of like realizing how far I've come. And it inspired me so much that it brought me to tears, because I just realized how much God has done for me, and just how blessed I am, even though I'm nowhere close to where I want to be. Like, just recognizing how far I've come really really did something for me. I feel like that's like such a deep gratitude that it goes
Mm.
beyond just saying thank you for your day. And so that deep sense of gratitude that you feel in your soul is something that I feel like everybody needs to experience. So take Tanya's advice, get into your meditative state, whether it be prayer, yoga, something, to have that quiet time, because it'll do wonders for you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's really important to look back and see your growth and celebrate yourself. We usually wait until it's our birthday or till it's Thanksgiving that we celebrate people and things. But when we like really just reflect and take that moment to be like, wow, just a month ago, I had a completely different perspective of the world and myself. And I want to, celebrate myself more for moving forward. And I'm sure you understand that feeling, once you get into the personal growth door, you're just like, ah, this is it's addictive in a way.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And, I know there's a lot of women out there, particularly young women, young Asian females who are kind of lost in a way. Like, I've been there, and you've been there too, where we're not so sure what we're doing, like just in life. And that can be an overwhelming feeling. Like you have to figure everything out. And a lot of the times we suppress that need to have a voice because we don't know what we've done, we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know where we're going. It's just an overall sense of being lost. So for somebody who is in that lost phase of their life, what would you say to them?
Mm, trust yourself and take the little step. What really is helpful is just having conversations like this and asking what having somebody to hold space for you and to really hear you is so, so important. And yeah, really, really start believing yourself and start opening your horizon to the possibilities out there. And I used to think it's so easy to really think when you are in like a place where you are stuck, it's easy to just be like, oh, this is it. This is the only state of being right now. And but when you like just take a deep breath in and realize that there are people out there that feel a certain way, who are inspired every day, and I can achieve that. That's a possibility for me. And what really, really, I guess, created a shift in my life when going on this like path, as well as my career, is that I teach people this, and I hold spaces, and I teach people how to empower themselves. And it wasn't actually until I saw a reflection of that possibility. So it wasn't until I searched the internet for a mentor, because I was like, I want guidance, and I know there's somebody out there. So I think just first step, get clear on what it is that you want. In my journey, I wanted guidance. I knew I needed space. I knew I needed a mentor. So that's what I searched for. And she was like the perfect person for me, because she was all about connecting to your womanhood, connecting to your voice, connecting to your truth. And she really brought that out in me. And that's what really helped me go fast. And that's why I'm so passionate about coaching itself as well. And I personally love having a coach who doesn't believe in the fears and the doubts that I tell myself. And I love doing that for people. So my advice, get clear, find somebody to hold space for you, and trust yourself. Yeah, that's it for now.
Those are really good. I love that. And I like what you said about wanting to figure out what you want first. And sometimes that's the hardest step. At least for me, I know or in the past, I didn't really know what I wanted, or that thing would change every single week of what I wanted. And so looking back at those times, I realized that it was because I didn't know who I was. And therefore I didn't know what I wanted. Because if you want to get to know somebody, you have to know who they are first before you can figure out what they want. And it's the same thing with yourself. And
Yeah.
I find a lot of girls don't know who they are. And I'm curious, how did you find yourself? Did you know that?
Um, well, I love that you mentioned that, because there's a quote that's coming up for me now, and it's, I forgot who said it, but they say the surest way to influence the world is to change your relationship with yourself. And that's super, super powerful. And yeah, I love that you bring up the fact that you need to get to know you first before you can actually create an impact, before you can actually do things and let life unfold the way you want it to unfold. Sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, well, that was a great point, by the way, and a great quote. I really love that. My question is how did you do that for yourself? How did you learn how to find yourself?
I became friends with my breath. And I teach this a lot, the power of connecting with our breath. I used to not breathe properly. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to become conscious of where and how you're breathing when you take a deep inhale in. Is it your chest coming up, or is it your belly rising? And it should be your belly going up and down, not really your chest, because when we are breathing with our chest going up, we're actually shallow breathing and we're not letting oxygen flow in our heads, and we're not nourishing our bodies. And it's so simple but so powerful. Yeah, it wasn't really until I became conscious of the way I breathe and also made it part of my daily routine to do the breath work and really consciously let it flow. And oh my gosh, if you are just getting new to breath work, I am so excited for you, because it's a whole new journey. So I the biggest factors of finding myself and loving myself is getting clear, breath work, awareness, and yeah, and I think those things just open the door to being compassionate to yourself and knowing that I am who I've always been looking for.
Wow. I did not expect you to say breath work. Honestly. Fascinating.
It just came up. Like I feel like somebody needs to hear that. Breath work is huge. Do you have experience with breath work?
I thought I did until you explained it, and I was like, oh, I think I'm shallow breathing.
That's okay.
So yeah, so that's probably something that I need to work on. Actually, for sure I do, because I when I'm doing something, I'll notice that I didn't breathe, and I'm like, oh, all right, I should like just a normal breath, like. And there'll be some days where I feel like my chest is heavy, and I realize it's because I was holding a lot of pressure here. And
Mm,
it's because I was so focused on whatever it was that I was doing that I like forgot to breathe, which is silly, but I feel like it's common.
yeah, when I first learned about breath work as well, I realized I was holding my breath a lot, and we all do this. And so with how that relates to finding my voice and my truth, I've actually realized that I was suppressing a lot of emotions and keeping it since I was little, and it wasn't until I used breath work to let it out. And this happens because our nervous system, when we felt unsafe to feel an emotion, especially at ages 0 to 7, when we felt unsafe to feel an emotion, it keeps us in us, and it becomes anxiety, it becomes fears, and it even can manifest into physical illness. And it's not until we consciously breathe that we let it out. And I hold spaces for people in this container where literally, like, after one session together, they just experience crazy breakthroughs, and it's been so magical.
Wow. Wow, that was really insightful. That's that's so interesting. So are you saying that when you're a kid, you start to learn how to hold your breath when you have an emotion that you can't express?
Not really for everyone. I personally did.
Mm-hmm.
But when, as children, we were operating in our subconscious, where we were like, until now, I think, guys, I'm not sure about this, but I think it takes 90 seconds to process an emotion in our nervous system. And when we don't process it properly, it stays in us. So that's when I mentioned that when we were kids, we actually really keep things in our nervous system, and as we grow older, it stays in us. It really does. And that's why people are usually wondering, like, oh, why am I so depressed, why am I so sad, and we don't really know it, but it's because we had emotions that made us feel sad when we were little that just never really came out.
Yeah, it's so
Mm.
true. Yeah, and coming from somebody who is, I'll call myself a serial suppressor of emotion, which is not a good
Mm.
thing. because I learned that very young as a child, and it was a habit because I had to. It was a coping mechanism I've learned to suppress emotions for at least 18 years of my life. So if you do something for 18 years of any life, that's going to be a part of you that's very deep. Like I'm still working on expressing emotions all the time. So I have to very actively think about what situation is happening, whether it be good, bad, ugly. I have to really think about it and really understand my feelings about it, because I'll often default to, I don't know how I feel about that. That is actually a phrase that I've used many, many times. And it actually takes more effort on the back end, like when I'm in my quiet time, to process those feelings,
Mm,
because most of the time in the moment, even if I try to figure out how I feel about that, I can't come up with an emotion. It's just blocked.
mm,
It's very interesting, but and
mm,
that just reinforces what we were talking about earlier of having that quiet time to
mm,
either meditate or be in prayer or be just in your own mind in a constructive manner, because
mm,
we all need to process the emotions like you were saying, but a lot of us need to do it in private with our own, or with our own being, as opposed to out in the open and around people. But for some people it's different, but for
mm,
us serial suppressors like myself, that is something that I found I really need to do.
mm. What situations does this come up? Like in arguments or
The part where
when you
I
don't know how to, yeah, like
don't know
just
how to
don't
feel.
express yourself.
I would say these days it's actually mostly with work.
Mm,
When something happens, I'll just move on to the next thing. Uh,
mm,
and other times too, like I am also very indecisive, but I think that trait comes from this suppression, because somebody will ask me like, well, what do you want to do about this situation? It could be as simple as like, where do you want to eat? And I'll be like, I don't know, or I don't care, or like I don't mind wherever. And sometimes that is true, but a lot of the times it is like it's just a gut reaction or a knee-jerk reaction just to not want to express my opinion, which ties back to your voice.
mm,
And
yeah.
so even if I did have an opinion, my default would be to just say, oh, it's up to you, or
Mm,
and even though it's not quite an emotion, but if that's how I was acting to something as simple as what do you want to eat, imagine
mm.
how many times I do it for something that's more serious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for being so open.
I am only so open because I've now learned this about myself and why I do it.
Mm,
Um, and so I'm a lot better at it now. I can now recognize when I'm falling into a suppressive default reaction to something, and I can recognize when I'm being better about it. So I will express now, I will open my mouth and say, I do not want to eat at that place. Which I couldn't do probably about a year and a half ago.
wow.
Yeah, so if you're one of those people out there, there's hope for you, and I promise you, you do have an opinion about where you want to eat. So feel free to open up your mouth, and if you feel like you can't, I really challenge you to go into that quiet space and figure out why that is, because that's an indication that you're dealing with something much deeper if you can't
Mm,
express your opinion about a restaurant, which I feel like is such a meme. Like people always say this about women.
yeah. Yeah. I'm like, what's coming up for me now is like, I'd love to help you through that on or on a private call. But but also I wanna share the other day I was at a restaurant. Actually, I was like at a cafe and I was alone, and I opened this like therapy magazine, and then I saw a page about stonewalling, and that's apparently I could be wrong, but what the definition was just feeling so overwhelmed with emotions that you just don't say anything. And I used to actually be like that, just like not express anything, and just also didn't know how to express myself, and just not showing emotion, probably just, yeah, just be quiet. And I cried when I read that. I was like, why am I crying right now? I think it was just because it was never explained to me. Like, it was never something that was talked about in the household I grew up in my environment, like about my emotions or anything. So at that moment in the cafe, I literally was just like, yep, this I'm just gonna let myself have this release and just um celebrate the fact that I've gone through that and I've grown from that person who would just not express themselves.
That's so good. Wow.
Mm. It was literally like last week too. So I haven't shared that with anyone. So
Well, this is an exclusive.
it always happens. Like when you get into like the healing journey, you just find yourself having breakdowns and breakthroughs.
Guys,
Just
I
like,
cried twice today. I cried twice today. I cannot believe it. Like,
oh my gosh.
yeah. So the first time was the story I already shared. And then I cried after a meeting with my manager because I realized that the emotions were bubbling up from an incident that happened like 2 years ago. Like,
Wow.
yeah. And yeah, it was a crazy time in the company and things were going not so well. And everybody in the office experienced it, felt it, and it caused a lot of issues with the company in terms of a lot of people left. And I was in a state of like, oh my gosh, like I was just, since that time, to keep a long story short, since that time, I've been always fearful of my job being taken from me for like 2 years. And I've been fearful that somebody's out to get me, that if I, you know, figuratively speaking, and that if I said something or did something even perceptually wrong by somebody else, I could lose my job. So it's been like this. I can't believe it's been 2 years that I've been feeling this way. And so it was just a very interesting conversation with my manager. Nothing is wrong. But I realized, I was like, okay, Kiani, why do you feel so stressed about this? Like nothing's wrong. Why do you feel like such a burden? Like why is there so much anxiety going on? And I realized it was because of that time, and I had to really talk myself out of the fact that there's that was a past time and that's not the truth now. Therefore, why are you holding on to it? Why are you still holding on to those feelings you experienced 2 years ago? And I feel like I'm still kind of working through it, but like now that I recognize, like, okay, like I can release that, like I can forgive that period of time of that, of giving me that anxiety and fear. So it's so interesting how you can, it's always a journey. So it's just for anybody out there, like everybody's like going through something that they don't realize they're going through until they just start like crying. And then like it's okay. Like it's okay to just start crying in a coffee shop or like crying after you talk to your manager, but figure out why. That's the only thing. Just make sure you figure out why you're crying and not just be like, I don't know. Like just figure it out on your quiet time.
Oh my gosh. I hope you honor yourself for that simple realization. It's like, I've been holding on to this and I can actually move on and release it now.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah,
huge.
it is. It's crazy. And it's like something I didn't even realize that was the problem.
Wow. How did it come up? Were you asked like by your manager, or you're just like you just reflected?
So for most of the meetings that I've had with a managerial figure, because it hasn't always been the same person. I've always felt this sense of anxiety since that time,
Mm,
2 years ago. I've always felt this anxiety and like just this kind of pressure. Um, and I couldn't ever pinpoint where exactly it was coming from. I just always had my defenses up. I always had like I was on high guard. And yeah, I think this meeting I had decided beforehand that it's going to be fine. It's all okay and there was nothing to be stressed about. But yet I was still like very anxious during the meeting, and I even got like a little bit emotional, and I was like, why? And then when we got off the phone, I just let myself cry. I just let myself do it because I felt the need to. and and I kind of laughed at myself in a good way. I like went I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, why are you crying? And then I was like, well, it's probably because you have this fear. And then why do you have this fear? I have this fear because of this that happened like 2 years ago, and it's completely different now. So there's no reason to be fearful of that right now because things are different. And
mm,
so I was jaded, basically. And to lift that feeling of being jaded, you have to recognize the reality of the situation, is what I've learned from that. So
wow,
yeah.
that's huge. That's huge. That takes courage to like really just get real with yourself, ask yourself those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, and if this is you on this call, it's okay, but learn to recognize that if you're not asking yourself these types of questions, you should you should start. And it might be scary to ask yourself these tough questions of like why do you feel this way, and it might be hard. You might have to actually set aside time to sit down with yourself, but I mean, if you're going to prioritize something else, like shouldn't you prioritize yourself
Yeah.
at least once?
Mm,
you know
yeah.
See what happens.
I do this exercise where I literally have two seats and I coach, I self coach myself. I have a coach, but he's not always with me. So I have two seats. Like you can't see me right now because you're listening to me, but I would literally be like, right, what's going on? And then I'd go to the next seat. I'm like, I fear something. It's like, what do you fear? And the things it's so worrying. I know if anyone watches or sees me, but you have to go through that and realize that also the first words that come out of your mouth are very they speak truth, and that's where just let it flow and write it down, record it, and just see what is coming up. And that's why holding space and having somebody in front of you again is so good, because they're there to listen to the subconscious leaks of your words.
That's
Yeah.
I love that. Sit down with chairs, coach yourself. You don't need a coach, just coach yourself.
You don't need a therapist, just be your own therapist. Wear different shirts.
Okay, if you're a beginner, don't try this at home. Actually find somebody that you're comfortable with to talk to. But when you're at a place like me and Tanya, where we've been through a personal growth journey, and we know those questions that we need to ask ourselves, then you can actually start asking yourself those questions and writing them down. That's so therapeutic for anybody in their personal growth journey. I feel like that's a necessary, just about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I shared yesterday on my story a quote by Tony Robbins, and he says, "The quality of your life is reflected by the quality of questions that you ask yourself."
That's a good one. That's really good.
So,
Yeah.
so good.
So good.
Journaling questions.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to end because wow, we've talked about so many great things. So, Tania, tell us where we can find you if somebody wants to um, potentially take you on as a coach. Where would they go, and what does that process look like?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you can check me out on Instagram. It's Tania Pow, Tania with an I, TANIAPOW. And you can check out my website. My website is linked on my Instagram, so you can check out more of my story and what I do, and also some written words from people I have worked with. And I have a affirmation audio that is also available on my website. And but if you are listening to this podcast, you can send me an emoji on Instagram, DM me, and I can send the audio to you. Send me an emoji of a heart, any color. So just like a secret code. Um, and I can send it to you. And I did talk about affirmations on this podcast and how self-talk really created and helped me with loving myself more. And the affirmation that I have is about self-love. And once we really start reprogramming our mind to feel good about ourselves, we start to effortlessly act that way and also attract other people who will treat us that way. So I'm really, really passionate about, yeah, affirmations, breathwork, meditation, and manifesting. And it is such a gift to share that with other people as well. So, yeah, you can check me out on there. Thank you so much, Kiani. You are awesome.
Yes, thank you, Tania. This has been so much fun. And guys, hit her up, send her those emojis because that's gonna help you and it's free. So, oh my gosh, free stuff.
Free stuff.
All right, Tanya. Well, thanks again.